I'm Susan Lewis from WRTI, here with Joe Conyers. Joe is Acting Associate Principal Bass of the Philadelphia Orchestra, founder and executive director of Project 440, which is an organization that helps young people use their music as life tools to contribute to their communities. And he's also music director of Philadelphia's All-City Orchestra. Joe, it's good to talk to you, and I know you're very busy.
I'm happy to be here. It's my pleasure, Susan.
Well, because of what's going on in the country, we at WRTI wanted to check in with artists to see what they're thinking.
Sure.
So what's on your mind as we go through this, everything that we're going through in the country?
And it's a lot, isn't it? It's a lot. It was a lot, 2 months ago, and became a lot more in a lot of ways. And it's been an interesting conversation for me, Susan, because I think for me, as someone who's African-American, there was no real shock. I know that might come as a shock to some, but it wasn't a real shock because there's so many points of injustice in our society that have been looked over for so long. I'll use myself as an example. When I came to study at the Curtis Institute of Music, I was a bright-eyed, bushy-tailed kid from Savannah who didn't know anything. I was actually scared of the big city. Philadelphia is a big place, and my focus, that is my world, was to become the best performer and the best artist I could be. But even then, I was always asking myself, like, well, now what? Now that I can do this, what else can I be doing? How can I share this? And before there were even real programs at Curtis, I was being involved with the programs that were set up to help out young people with Adopt a School. That was a program started by Mary Javian, who's at Curtis now. But those are all little things at that time. Fast forward to coming back to Philadelphia after having left in 2005 and coming back in 2010, I was super excited about having a job with the Philadelphia Orchestra, but I was a little bit more, my eyes were a little bigger. I could see the city of Philadelphia. And for me, one of the things that bugged me the most was why, given all the resources that we have as musicians, as myself, and just the city as a whole, looking at some of these communities, learning that Philadelphia is one of the poorest cities in the country. And Susan, it's not even a matter of if someone is a different race or ethnicity or anything like, it's like, how can we use our gifts for good and for service to others? Because growing up, that's the country that I learned about. And it was disheartening, to say the least, that despite the fact that we are statistically one of the poorest, I think, if not the poorest major city in the country, there weren't more active initiatives to address those issues. And I always tell everyone, I'm just a bass player. And there's maybe not a lot I can do as a bass player to make a difference, but by golly, I'm gonna put in all the energy that I have to try to make a difference. And working with young people has been the thing that has fueled me in a lot of these communities that need those services the most.
So you grew up in Savannah?
Savannah's home, yeah.
How did you get started playing the bass?
We had a musical family. My mother heard classical music on the radio and thought it was this beautiful thing. She heard this as a child. She didn't come from some family of generations of musicians and having all this support. She actually just heard it on the radio and thought it was this beautiful thing and wanted her children to play. And sure enough, she's an amateur singer, and she had all of her children play, and she would sing in the Savannah Symphony Choir. And that was actually my introduction to classical music, because growing up, I grew up in a traditional African-American Baptist church. And so gospel music was one of my first connections to music. But I started piano when I was 5 and was playing hymns and not realizing that all that hymn playing was actually teaching me voice leading in my head. And those two worlds were actually the same for me. My gospel, I love singing. I always tell everyone I sing a mean alto in the choir. I love singing in the choir, but I also love performing as a musician in classical music, because to me, there are two different languages saying the same thing.
Right. Well, you say you were not shocked. How you have so much contact with kids these days.
Yes.
There's been so much turmoil, and you have to say something to the kids. I noticed you wrote a letter on.
Yeah.
Can you talk about, even if you personally weren't shocked, how do you explain this to the kids that you deal with?
Ooh, that's heavy. That's heavy because it's not easy. Many of the kids I work with, they know the injustices because they see them every day as well. I think if there's an excitement, if that's the word, I don't know if that's the correct word to use in this context, but if there's any kind of enthusiasm about what's going on, is that if this is, and even in my lifetime, we might be in this place where the voices are being heard, and being able, and actually I'm proud of a lot of my young people. I just got an email today just commenting that how many of the students that we work with are being very active voices amongst their peers in this context. Some of our students just performed, they put together a full Black Lives Matter concert on the steps of the art museum, and to see a former student with a bullhorn, literally getting the crowd activated. I mean, there are many organizations that play a role, but I always say I hope that there's the role that Project 440 played in providing that sense of kind of comfort in one's own skin and letting them know that you can make change. And that's one of the things we like to work with our students. It really is about letting them know that while it may be difficult, they can have the agency to make the change that they want to see. And it's generally about having the right conversations, moving their thought processes along from a concept to something that's actually actionable, and then bringing those things to life and fruition. So for that, I'm really, really proud of all of the young people I get to work with, because they are actively trying to make that change.
Right. So what was the driving force that compelled you to found Project 440? You said you saw that there were poor communities and they didn't need to be, but what made you connect music as a tool of social change?
Because music is so awesomely ready to be used in that way. I mean, many of us think of music as this thing in the concert hall, but music is, that to me, that's a very two-dimensional approach to what we do. Just being a performer on the stage, honestly, I'm speaking for myself, Susan. I'm not speaking for every musician. But for me, I find that to be actually, for me, it's boring because it's way more than that. I mean, the same light, I have heard many of my colleagues talk about this, but the same light that you might see in a child's eyes when you play music for the first time and how they make that connection. Well, then how can you use that connection to do more things, to start conversations in a community, to get people who may not normally speak to each other, to make statements to a community or for a community. And that makes us some really powerful folks. So what happens to me in an institution like an orchestra goes far beyond those walls that we play concerts, but it's a much more grandiose vision of what we can be and how we can be, honestly, civic musicians or musician citizens that actually are ambassadors for not only for the art, but for this idea of connectivity and bringing things to light where that's what art is. We disrupt. It is supposed to make us uncomfortable, and throughout history it has. And I think sometimes, even in a movement like Black Lives Matter, we want to, the industry can pull back and say, oh, that's not, but this is actually a time when we can lean in and actually use music as a tool to start these really, really important conversations. Because I said this before, it's one thing to talk about wanting change, but it's another thing to actually make that change. Right.
And the kids that you deal with, the kids who did the performance on the art museum steps, yeah. How have they responded to you in the conversations you've had with them as to what they see for the future?
They generally, I'll even start with one of the young women who led the endeavor. Well, she said at another event, completely unrelated. It was actually earlier this year. I gave a speech, and she goes, "Why didn't you give up on us in Philadelphia? You worked so hard, and we weren't the easiest to work with. But why didn't you give up on us?" And I told her it was because of moments like this, in that moment, because and now more moments like seeing her on the steps with that bullhorn and being changed. And I'm hoping that I may have played a small part in letting them know that you can be agents of change. You don't have to wait for someone or wait for permission to do a lot of things. Sometimes you just actually have to do it. And in my work in Philadelphia, that's sometimes what I've had to do is just do it. Because if I waited for permission, I might be waiting a long time, Susan Lewis, a long time. So I just hope, and I recognize that. I mean, I'm the music director of the All City Orchestra here in Philadelphia, and I do take that I wear that as something as I carry it on my shoulders. Just being that inspiration and letting them know that it's weird saying this, but I can be someone that they look up to or have a conversation with and help guide, and so they can be the best versions of themselves possible.
Wow. So what kind of music do you think, if any, will help us at this time?
Ooh, that's what, I don't know if there is a kind of music, because everyone comes to music at a different way. I mean, the same way I said classical music and gospel music spoke to me just as equally. Someone might say it's R&B and country. I don't know. Like, it really. I think the most important thing is that we allow it to speak to us. That's what I would say. Not to say that we should be listening, but we actually allow it to help guide us. And I mean that. I mean, this sounds a little out there, but work with me for a second. But all the things that we love music about, the things that we say it brings people together, the feelings that it has, that is a uniquely human experience. And I think if we embrace that component of music, then we can actually address each other as equals, because we're having this shared experience together. So, and that's, to me, something that's exciting about even being a classical musician. I mean, even with my nonprofit, Project 440, we don't say we work with classical musicians. We are big advocates for music excellence, and that's just a huge part of our work. But it's actually having all these different genres and having these young people working with each other, kind of using that shared love to build these bridges with each other. They'll build these bridges with their community, and to actually build a bridge for their future about what their lives can be, using music as that lens. So again, it's not a specific music. I think it's actually just that, what music is, and that real tie that binds.
And so before the recent horrible things that have been happening and the social unrest, what kind of activities were you encouraging the kids to do?
So with Project 440, we are a unique organization in that we are a music organization that doesn't teach music. So we literally use music as that launching off point to speak about things in college, career, entrepreneurship, leadership development. How can they use music as a lens to discover what their leadership qualities are? And one of our flagship programs is called Doing Good. In Doing Good, the students actually, the first semester is learning who they are, learning how they work with each other, learning how to build leadership skills, learning to assess the needs of a community, with music as that vehicle to do that. Then they go through this process where they vet those ideas in front of a panel of industry leaders, and then we give them seed money to bring their ideas to fruition. So our students get the practice of putting together a budget and working with different community leaders, and they get the practice of What is it like to organize a team to do the things that they want to do? And what's exciting is at the end of the process, we get to see the incredible work that they've done. So we really do hope we're causing a ripple effect in Philadelphia, and that we're instilling these lifelong skills in young people that they can then put in their communities. And some of our kids' programs have continually gone on. One has become fiscally sponsored, Generation Music. They have a board, and they provide music to young people in schools, elementary and middle, here in Philadelphia, with a curriculum that they've developed on their own.
Cool. So I was going to ask you, what are some of the projects that you've been most excited about?
Yeah, Generation Music is really, they've done some incredible work, and they built on the program since it was part of Project 440 initially. It was just strictly going to schools, but now they're doing partnerships. They've worked with Stellman Music School, and I have the great pleasure of introducing other organizations to Generation Music. They're building their own teaching artist roster to help, and they're inspiring others. Another group that got started under Project 440 is a group called the Center City Chamber Orchestra, which I believe may have been covered by y'all, but they are an orchestra run by youth, conducted by youth, and played by youth. And they have given concerts annually at the Trinity Center for Urban Life here in Philadelphia to huge crowds. Actually, it's been really incredible the work that they've done. And again, they're just inspiring others, and they're inspiring other young people to kind of follow in their footsteps. And I feel like it really is those role models that are important for other young people to see. I mean, it's not, when working with young people, particularly in impoverished communities, I would say it's, to me, more of the energy is letting them know what is possible. Because if they don't see what is possible, they will not reach or strive for that thing. They can only know the world that they're in. But if we can show them that through music, which is, again, this thing that connects so many people, that they can reach these heights, they can put a concert together and work with young people across the city who they may never have had the opportunity to meet with otherwise. And then all the other wonderful inherent things that music brings to our lives as musicians, it kind of opens up a whole new world of possibility. And that's when I really talk about using music as a tool, because it is a world of possibility, particularly to some of our most disenfranchised young people.
Wow, it's so great. And it's so important to give people those skills to take charge and feel empowered to make a change.
Yes, and let them know it's not easy. I mean, that's the thing, this work is not easy. And I think if there's further explanation to some of the unrest that we've seen, is that it hasn't been easy. And despite multiple attempts, things haven't changed in a way that really makes everyone equal. Ideas of, not ideas, but the fact that systemic racism exists, and the history of our country founded on slavery. I mean, I grew up in a part of the country where the Confederate flag you saw as often. I mean, honestly, 2/3 of the Georgia flag that I knew growing up was the Confederate flag. So it was actually ingrained in the culture and kind of accepted as this thing. And it's unfortunate beyond words that these travesties have to kind of start the conversation up. And then even worse, that these protests that have been passionate, to say the least, have to bring those issues to the forefront. But I just simply think about, as an African American, I simply think about all those who died being in this country, hoping and working that one day I could be speaking to you in this moment as the acting associate principal double bass of the Philadelphia Orchestra. And that's what I really want to instill in my young people. We may not see the change that we're hoping to make, but that shouldn't, one, discourage us. If anything, should make us work harder. And if you take the work that I do with Project 440, it really is, how can we, to use the cliche, pay it forward as people, so that the opportunities only get better for the generations to come.
Right. Well, it sounds as if you've been doing this kind of work that's important and necessary. And with the recent events, as you say, it's terrible that we've had this situation has brought us to this point, but maybe we are now talking about it more openly. And,
Yes.
and maybe because we are talking about it more openly, change is possible.
Change is possible. I mean, I'm excited about what's going on at the Philadelphia Orchestra. There have been conversations that way predates all that has happened to talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And not just that it's a fad, but how are we actually addressing this institutionally to our core? And what does this mean? And what does it look like? Because, I mean, some of the work that I do with Project 40 does address the world, but I am part of an industry that has for a long time looked one way and played one type of music. And if anything, that's just been so limiting, and the possibilities are endless about how we can use music to connect in the ways that I said earlier, to communities and start these conversations and work with young people and meeting young people where they are. I mean, classical music, like, it's very easy. I love Brahms. I mean, Brahms is my favorite composer, but I can't go into a community because I also love gospel. And if the gospel is the only music that a young person knows, I can't say, well, Brahms is more important. I would never do. But in a lot of ways, our industry has kind of done that. We've gone into spaces and said, like, you need to know this. This will, like, somehow uplift you. And that's not what music is about. Music is about conversation, literally playing on the stage. And how Yo-Yo Ma speaks of this thing called the edge effect, where when you have two ecosystems, where you have the most variety, the most kind of excitement in nature, the most ingenuity happens in this place where those two ecosystems meet. That's the excitement about what we do in music. Why do you want to stay in one ecosystem over here and one over there? What happens when you start to bring these together? And we can do that on the stage, and we can do that in our communities. And all of a sudden, this place, the edge effect, is where we kind of get the party together as one, which is, I mean, I could go on and on, Susan, about how much that excites me, because those are the conversations that I want to see in the work of classical music.
That's great. That's so exciting. Well, and we didn't mention why your organization is called Project 440.
Ah, yes. So we changed our name in 2010 because we started in Savannah, Georgia, as an organization that provided community engagement opportunities for young people with the absence of the Savannah Symphony, which actually filed Chapter 7 in 2003. As we did this work more often, we realized it was very difficult to find musicians with the skill set to even come down to Savannah to do this work. So we shifted our focus from doing the work ourselves to teaching young musicians how to do this work and the importance of doing this work. And over our time of the last, now we've been in Philadelphia 10 years with the name change, we've been working with the wonderful partners of the School District of Philadelphia and the teachers of the school district. We fine-tune our programs into something that really uplifts the student. So it's both college and career preparedness, coupled with social entrepreneurship training and leadership training. We have our biggest event of the year is at the Kimmel Center for the Performing Arts with our college fair. We had 50 colleges come right here to Philadelphia to meet our kids free of charge. We had over 300 participants last year. We're reimagining what that might look like in 2020 because we don't know if we can get that many people together in one room. But it's all about providing these resources and uplifting students in this way so that whether they become musicians or not, they know that they have a duty. If they have a gift, how can they use that gift for service? And if they do become musicians, they take that mindset with them and completely disrupt all that's been going on in our industry for so long. And so it's a win-win for all.
And the symbolism about 440
Oh, I didn't even get to that. So, so 440, 440 is the comes from the pitch, is the pitch A, 440 hertz. And that's the pitch that is used to tune the orchestra, played by the oboe. So the violin concertmaster walks out, and then the oboe player plays this pitch, and it's the pitch A, 440 hertz. So just like that's the first pitch you hear at every concert, so we want our young people to be leaders in their community through music.
Wonderful. Really great. So is there any piece of music that you've been listening to recently that's made you feel, I don't know, been a good soundtrack to your life?
Well, okay. One of my favorites, so I said Brahms is my favorite. His first violin sonata to me is, if that's one of my desert island pieces, or if I had to put music in a time capsule, it might be the Brahms first violin sonata. That's such a gorgeous piece. That and his third symphony are very at the heart of Joe Conyers, I think, and they always bring me solace. Yeah, yeah.
Terrific. Joe, thank you so much for spending a little time with us. And it is a difficult time for us all now, but difficult for the country. But you have tremendous enthusiasm and optimism, which is kind of contagious. So
I think our best days lie before us, particularly in our industry, and what we can do, and using music as a tool in this way to address even some of these big issues. It's an exciting time for what we do and who we bring into the conversation. So I can't help but be optimistic. Oh, and my blood type is B positive. So there you have it. It works well for me because it keeps me alive, but also works well for my psyche because it reminds me to have a positive outlook on things in life, and it gives me and fuels the enthusiasm that I have about where we can go as an industry.
Great. Thank you so much, Joe Conyers.
My pleasure.